Well, for some of us, life is a series of lessons. Some of them we learn kind of quietly, like when your parents tell you not to put your hand on the stove because you'll get burnt. And some we learn kind of more of an in-your-face way, like when you put your hand on the stove and you burn it and your parents tell you that's what happens when you put your hand on a hot stove. And some of these lessons have gotten so into our culture that we have all these little sayings for them, like work hard, persevere, focus on your goals, can't tell a book by its cover, all these things that we learn as we go along through life. In my late 20s, I found that I was a divorced mother of 2 small children. Obviously, I learned that marry in haste, repent at pleasure was another lesson that I needed to learn. But I also learned that I had 1 year of college, so it wasn't enough for me to support my family. So I went through the focus on your goal, I need to get an education, work hard, persevere, keep going, and I trudged my way through school, graduate school, and graduated. And I really believed that anyone could have done what we did, work, go to school, and raise 2 kids, if only you did those things. You worked hard, you focused on your goal, it's what you had to do. So several years later, I found myself working in New Jersey for a dental health company. And I was still gung-ho, focusing on those goals. And part of the company that we had an inside sales group. And these were the fun people that lived in cubicles, that had the phones, they had the funny contests. And they were basically 20 and 30-year-olds who this was their first job before they went on to something else. That is all except for someone I'll call Chris. Chris was at least 25 years older than I was, and he was an inside salesperson. And he was very good at his job. But he was the person that came in dead on time in the morning and left exactly on time at the evening. And if someone had asked this arrogant young person what she thought, she would have said, very nice guy, but he's obviously not working hard, not focusing, he's just not going after the goals. And that's probably how I felt about it, because I was still there doing that. Then one Monday, Chris didn't come into work. And we soon learned that Chris had had a major heart attack and died the night before. And later that week, I found myself going with colleagues to his funeral. And when we got within sight of this immense church where he lived, I noticed that there were traffic police out. They were guiding people into this parking lot where this church was. And we were lucky enough to get early enough to get some seats, but by the time the service began, the church was packed to the rafters. And I thought, wow, all these people came out for Chris. And one after another, people got up and people said, Chris had this impact on my community. He was part of this committee. You could always ask him for help. People in the church stood up and said what he had done for the church and how he was one of the key members in that church. And friends and family stood up and said that he was the greatest friend they'd ever had, that he was always there to help, and that he was a father that other fathers emulated. They were so lucky to have him as a parent. And when I left the church and was driving back to the office, this hit me just like putting my hand on the stove and getting burnt. I realized how silly I had been, how blinded I had been. I only knew this little part of Chris's life. I was actually going to make a judgment about a person based on the one part of his life that I saw. I did not know the 360 degrees of his life. I didn't realize that Chris's priorities were way different than mine. He put his on his family and his community. His job was very secondary to what he was doing. He was truly a hometown hero, and I have to thank Chris to this day for giving me one of the most valuable lessons I have ever learned. Do not judge people based on the little bit of their life that you see, because there's so much more than that. There's so much going on in the rest of their lives. I don't always good at it, but I try very hard not to judge a book by its cover. Thank you.